The wind scraped low across the prairie, dragging dust and dried thistle across the open plain like old bones. A single crow flew against the pale morning sky, black wings slow and labored, as if it too had lost the will to go on. The land stretched out empty, no fence lines, no houses, only broken grass and the promise of winter hardening in the dirt. She stood at the edge of a dry creek bed, her dress hanging off her shoulders like a shed skin. The hem was torn and stained from the long walk, and her boots too small and worn through at the toe bit into her feet with every step. One child on her hip, the other slumped against her leg. Neither spoke. The youngest had stopped crying the night before, and that silence weighed heavier than hunger. She did not know the name of this place. It wasn't on the map she had found, back when she still believed maps meant something. Her husband had said they'd make it west before the first frost, that there'd be work and shelter, maybe even school for the boys. That was before the trail turned to nothing and he turned mean. Before he took the horse and half the supplies, left her sleeping with the children curled around her ribs, and never came back. Now, the sky held no sign of mercy. No smoke from chimneys, no bark of dogs, no trail ruts from wagons, just the hiss of wind in the grass and the ache behind her knees as she lowered herself to the ground. She had not eaten in 3 days, the boys less. Her milk had gone dry before the 3rd week. She still held the youngest when he whimpered in his sleep, out of habit more than comfort. Her voice had gone quiet, too. No more songs, no promises. She could only offer her body heat and a heartbeat that clung to life out of spite. She tilted her face up. The sun was climbing. Her lips cracked when she licked them. Dust coated her teeth. Her breath caught in the base of her throat like gravel. And then, from somewhere beyond the ridge, came a sound low, steady, unmistakable. Hoofbeats. Not thunder, not memory, real. She did not stand. She could not. She adjusted the child on her hip and reached for the older boy, who leaned into her like a sapling bending in wind. Together, they waited, eyes locked on the shimmer of heat at the horizon. The rider came slow, tall in the saddle, broad-shouldered, a shadow under the brim of his hat. His horse picked its way down the ridge with caution, nostrils flaring at the unfamiliar scent of human suffering. He was not young, not old, the kind of man shaped by weather and work. Dust caked his coat and his face was lined with quiet. He stopped a few feet away, boots still in the stirrups, and studied her without a word. She didn't beg. She didn't speak. She only looked up at him through hollow eyes and whispered the only truth she had left. "My kids are hungry." There was no pity in his face, only a slow narrowing of the eyes, as if the words had struck something deep, something long buried. He dismounted. The horse stood calm, reins hanging loose. He walked toward them, boots crunching the dry grass, and knelt beside the older boy, reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a strip of jerky, holding it out without a word. The boy looked at his mother. She nodded once. He ate slowly, small bites, like he was afraid the food might vanish. The man turned to her. His voice was low. "Not while I'm here." She didn't cry. She couldn't. She just closed her eyes for a moment and let the words settle into her skin like warmth. He offered his canteen. She took it with both hands and drank. The water was lukewarm and tasted of metal. It might as well have been holy. He looked at the child on her hip. "He needs sugar," he said. "Salt, too. I've got something back at the house." The word house felt foreign, dangerous. She hesitated, looked at the horse, at the empty land. 3 miles, he said. No farther. She stood, legs trembling, and nodded. He took the older boy's hand. She didn't stop him. There was something steady in his grip, something solid. The man whistled to the horse, and the animal followed, reins dragging in the dirt. They walked together, the 4 of them, through the silence. She did not know his name. He did not ask for hers. But the land bore witness. The house rose up from the prairie like a stone held tight in a calloused hand, plain, square, and weathered gray. Its boards were bleached from sun and age, the porch sagging just enough to make it look tired. but the roof was whole, and smoke curled from the chimney in a slow, steady line. The smell of burning cedar drifted out to meet them, soft and sharp, and for the first time in days, she felt her jaw unclench. He helped the older boy onto the porch while she shifted the younger higher on her hip. The baby whimpered as if remembering what it meant to hope. Her arms ached, her back screamed, but she kept walking, one foot, then the other, until she reached the steps and stopped. "I'll make something warm," the man said. He didn't wait for permission. Just stepped through the door and left it open behind him. The interior was small, cool in the shade, clean in a way that wasn't fussy, orderly out of habit, not pride. A pair of boots by the door, a hat hanging from a nail, a cot in the corner with a single wool blanket folded sharp. The table bore the scuffs of use but no clutter. A rifle hung above the fireplace, not for show but for need. She sat. The bench creaked under her weight. The older boy stood beside her, chewing slow. His face had lost that empty glaze, replaced now by the faint tension of confusion. Safe felt strange. The man moved around the kitchen with the ease of routine. He stirred something in a black pot on the stove, the scent of beans and lard filling the room. He didn't talk much, but when he did, his voice carried the calm of a man used to long silences and simple truths. "They call this Dry Creek Valley. Been no real rain since early summer. Lost a few calves, but most of the herds held up." She nodded, though she wasn't sure why. The words settled around her like dust. "Name's Eli," he added after a moment. She opened her mouth, but her voice scraped raw. She coughed, tried again. "Mara." He looked at her then, just a flick of the eyes, and nodded. A small thing, but in the stillness, it felt like a handshake. The stew was thick. He spooned it into tin bowls and placed them gently in front of the boys. He handed her a third, his hand brushing hers, rough and warm. She tried not to gulp, but the food lit a fire in her chest. The youngest fell asleep on her shoulder, belly full, mouth slack with milk-stained dreams. Eli didn't eat much, just watched them. Not in a way that made her flinch, but with something else. Like he was taking measure, not judging, but remembering. "You come from the south?" he asked. She paused. "We left from Yuma. Meant to head north. But..." She didn't finish. She didn't have to. He nodded again, as if the story was familiar. Maybe it was. "They all say it's better somewhere else," he said, more to himself than to her. She let her eyes wander over the shelves by the stove. Canned peaches, flour sacks, salt. A sliver of stained glass above the sink, green and blue like a piece of river stuck in wood. "You live alone?" she asked. For now, that answer hung heavy between them, the way old grief does. The afternoon light shifted. The room grew golden and still. The older boy leaned against the wall, eyes fluttering closed. The baby murmured in sleep. Mara brushed a hand over their hair, her fingers trembling. "You don't have to stay out here," Eli said. "The storm will be on us come nightfall. Wind hits hard from the east. You'll need shelter." He didn't say it like a savior. No pride in his voice. Just a fact. Like naming the weather, or death. She nodded slowly. "I can work," she said, throat tight. "I'm not looking for charity." "You can stay," he said, simple and quiet. "That's enough." He didn't press, didn't preach, just stood there, like a tree that had weathered more storms than he could count. She looked down at her hands, at the dirt in her nails, the thin line of a scar near her wrist. She had left behind so much names, wedding vows, dreams that turned to bruises, but in that quiet room, with soup cooling in a tin bowl and 2 children asleep beside her, something small inside her began to uncoil. Not trust, not yet, but breath. And breath was the beginning of everything. If this story felt carved from your own sorrow, subscribe and follow the healing road. The wind picked up after sundown. It came in hard from the east, just as Eli had said, rattling the loose corners of the roof and moaning through the cracks like some restless thing with nowhere left to go. The fire in the stove crackled low, casting long shadows across the walls. Mara stood near it, hands spread to catch the heat, while Eli poured a measure of cornmeal into a skillet, eyes steady, movements unhurried. The boys slept on the cot under Eli's blanket, curled into each other like pups. Mara had watched them for a long time before stepping away, reluctant to leave their sides even for warmth. The baby whimpered once, but didn't wake. His cheeks were pink with heat, and his mouth still smelled faintly of beans. Eli didn't look at her when he spoke. "There's a shed out back. Not much, but it's dry. I keep a cot and some old quilts in there for ranch hands when they come through." She nodded. "That'll do." He glanced at her then, brow drawn. "You don't have to. The boys can stay inside. I'll take the shed." "No," she said, quick and sharp. Then softer. "I need to stay near them. They've had too many nights apart." He held her gaze for a moment. Something passed between them, not understanding, not yet, but a sort of recognition. A man who'd lived quiet long enough could hear a woman's pain even when she didn't speak it. He finished cooking in silence, gave her a plate, and took one for himself. They ate by the fire, neither one saying much. Outside, the wind dragged at the shutters like fingers on wood. After a time, he cleared his throat. "You got folks back where you came from?" She shook her head. "My folks died when I was a girl. There's nobody now, just us." He nodded slowly. "Mine's buried not far from here. Folks settled this land before there was a town, just a well and a name carved in a post. My father stayed after my mother passed. Wouldn't leave. Said land don't belong to men who walk away from it." Mara looked at him, the firelight catching the hollows of his face. He looked older in that light, not by years but by weight. "Did you want to leave?" she asked. He shrugged. "Wanted a few things once. A wife, maybe kids, but things don't always grow the way you plant 'em." That quiet settled again, deep and full, the kind that asks nothing and fills everything. Later, he helped her carry the boys to the shed, wrapping them in quilts that smelled of cedar and sun-warmed dust. The cot creaked as she laid them down, and their breathing stayed slow, steady. She brushed their foreheads with the back of her hand, checking for fever, for fear. Finding neither, she stepped back. Eli stood in the doorway, one shoulder against the frame, arms crossed. "There's coffee in the morning. You'll need it." She almost smiled. It had been a long time since anyone spoke of mornings as though they were guaranteed. "I'll help with chores," she said. "There's always work." She looked around the shed, plain wood, a lantern, the smell of hay in the corners. It wasn't much, but it was still more than she had yesterday. "Thank you," she said. He didn't nod this time, just looked at her, the same steady way he looked at the horizon, and said, "Sleep. You're safe here." He stepped out, pulling the door partway shut behind him. The wind howled once more, then faded into something quieter, almost like breath. Inside, wrapped in borrowed quilts with her children asleep beside her, Mara closed her eyes. Her body ached, her mind swirled, but deep in her chest, something loosened. She had not come looking for safety. She had not believed it still existed. But for tonight, she had found it. Mara rose before the sun. The cold bit through the thin shed walls, sharp and honest, and the frost that edged the window panes gleamed silver in the half-light. She slipped from the quilts, careful not to wake the boys, and wrapped the baby in an extra blanket before stepping outside. The wind had calmed. What remained was the kind of stillness that made sound feel like an intrusion. She crossed the yard quickly, her breath ghosting ahead of her. The main house stood firm against the early blue of morning, smoke already lifting from the chimney in thin, purposeful lines. She knocked once on the door, out of habit more than need. Eli opened it, boots already laced, shirt sleeves rolled. He stepped aside without a word, and she passed through into the warmth. "I didn't think you'd come this early," he said. She moved to the stove, held her hands out to the heat. "I said I'd work." He nodded. "I was up checking on the stock. Frost hit harder than I thought." She turned to him, her face lined with sleep and quiet resolve. "Show me what needs doing." He studied her for a second. Then he grabbed a second coat from the hook and handed it over. Too big, but thick and warm. She pulled it on, rolled up the sleeves. They started in the barn. The cows lowed softly as they entered, their breath rising in small clouds. Mara moved without needing direction, hauling water, spreading feed, brushing frost off the bridles. She didn't ask questions. She didn't complain. When her arms shook from the weight of a bucket, she simply set it down, rested a moment, and picked it up again. Eli watched her out of the corner of his eye, not interfering, just observing. "You've done ranch work before?" he asked after a while. "No," she said, shoveling hay. "But I've done hungry, and I've done tired." That was enough. They moved to the fence line after breakfast, checking for gaps, hammering loose posts. She winced with each strike of the mallet, her hands still raw from the days on the road, but she didn't slow. Her knuckles bled. She wrapped them in a strip of cloth and kept going. Eli passed her a flask. "There's whiskey in it." She took a sip. It burned all the way down. She handed it back with a nod. Midday came. The sun had climbed just enough to warm their backs, but not the wind. They ate cornbread and beans by the barn, seated on overturned buckets. She let her legs stretch out in the dirt, grateful for stillness. "You ever think about going back?" he asked. She shook her head. "There's nothing back there but names I won't say and a house that's not standing." "You're brave," he said. "No," she replied, just still breathing. He looked down at his plate. She saw his jaw tighten slightly. "Sometimes," he said, "that's the bravest thing there is." That night, she stayed in the shed again, though Eli offered the cot in the house. She said it was for the boys, but truth was, she still didn't trust warmth that came without a price. Still, she let him bring her supper, and she let herself eat it with the lantern lit, while the baby gurgled in sleep beside her. She was beginning to recognize the smells of the place: cedar, wood smoke, horse sweat. They were beginning to feel like something close to familiar. The next day, she milked a cow for the first time, laughed when she got sprayed in the face. Eli chuckled from where he leaned against the stall, and she realized she hadn't heard laughter in months, not even her own. "You'll get the hang of it," he said. "I already did," she shot back, flicking a drop of milk his way. It landed on his boot. He smiled, and it was quiet but genuine. Later that evening, while the boys drew shapes in the dirt with sticks and the sky turned to copper behind the hills, Mara sat on the porch steps, arms wrapped around her knees. Eli came up behind her and sat down without speaking. They watched the dusk settle. "You never asked what happened," she said, after a long silence. "I figured you'd tell it if you wanted to." She nodded, eyes on the horizon. "I was 17 when I married him. He promised land, a future. Turned out he had nothing but a mean streak and a bottle. Left me the day before my youngest turned 1. Eli didn't respond with pity, just sat with it, with her, like the silence could hold them both. "I thought I was dead," she whispered. "Inside, I mean." He nodded slowly. "You ain't." And it felt true. The days began to stitch together with quiet work and soft routine. The prairie, once a threat, started to feel like a slow companion, harsh, yes, but steady. The kind of place that tested everything you were made of, but gave back in small, honest ways if you held your ground. Mara rose each morning before the boys stirred. She fed the chickens, hauled water, helped Eli repair a broken axle on the wagon. Her body was sore in places she hadn't known could ache, but the pain had meaning now. It wasn't survival, it was purpose. The boys followed Eli like shadows. The older one, Samuel, learned to mend tack with small, careful fingers. The baby, Nathan, had taken to crawling after the old hound that slept near the stove, giggling in high, raw bursts that broke the silence like birdsong. Eli didn't push, he didn't prod. He let them find their place. And Mara, despite every scar and warning bell stitched into her ribs, began to lean toward the light. She found a rhythm to the work. She took pride in a clean barn, in bread that didn't burn, in the way Eli handed her the right tool without a word. They didn't talk much, but their silences changed. They became companionable, a kind of shared shelter. One night, with the fire low and the boys already curled up in the shed, Eli brought out a small wooden box. He didn't say what it was at first, just placed it on the table, his hands lingering on the worn lid. Mara looked at him. "You don't have to." "I know," he said, "but I want to." Inside were letters, old, yellowed, brittle. Some had ribbons, others had names written in ink that had almost vanished. "My wife," he said, "Clara. She died during the cholera outbreak, 1891. Mara didn't breathe for a moment. She looked down at the letters, at the soft, curved script, the pressed flowers between two pages. "She was sweet," he said, "but strong, braver than me, most days. When she passed, I didn't leave the ranch for 2 years. Couldn't stand the idea of town. Couldn't stand folks trying to be kind." Mara nodded. She knew that feeling too well. "She wanted children," Eli said, his voice tightening. "We never got the chance." Mara reached across the table and touched his hand. Just lightly, just enough. He didn't pull away. "She'd have liked your boys," he said after a while. She looked at him, her heart sharp with something too new to name. "She'd have liked you too." For a long time, they said nothing. The fire popped in the stove. Outside, wind rustled the dry grass, soft as breath. Eventually, Mara stood. "I should get back to them." Eli rose with her, walked her to the door. The moon hung low and gold over the pasture, casting long shadows across the land. At the door, she hesitated. "Thank you," she said, "for all of this." His eyes met hers, steady. "You're not here on accident, Mara. You didn't just stumble into this. You've earned your place." She swallowed hard. "It's just the first time someone said that." He nodded, and she could feel his words before he spoke them. "Well, it won't be the last." She stepped out into the night. The chill hit her skin, but she didn't shiver. Behind her, Eli closed the door softly, not to shut her out but to let her rest. And as she crossed the yard, the shed ahead and the warmth of sleeping children waiting inside, she realized something deep in her chest had shifted. She was not surviving anymore. She was beginning to live. Winter came slow, then all at once. The first snow arrived with a silence so complete it swallowed every sound but the creak of the roof and the low breath of the stove. By mid-December, the ground lay buried beneath a thick white hush, and the road to town became a memory drawn in wind and guesswork. The ranch closed in on itself, wrapped in frost, in ritual, in the small closeness that came from living day by day beside someone, not ahead of them or behind. Mara took to mending clothes by lamplight, while the boys played on the rug with sticks and carved animals Eli had made from leftover cedar. Nathan had begun to toddle. His first real steps stumbled between her knees and Eli's boots, the boy too proud to fall and too wild to stop. Eli spent the coldest days breaking ice on the troughs and hauling hay to the cattle. Mara joined him most mornings, breath steaming, wool scarf tucked tight. He didn't stop her anymore, didn't ask if she needed rest. She had proven herself, and he treated her as equal. That unspoken respect, more than anything, unraveled something in her. And she came to know him in pieces, the way snow slowly reveals the shape of a fence or a branch. He hummed when he worked, mostly old hymn tunes, the kind you didn't need faith for, just memory. He never raised his voice, not with her, not with the boys. When something broke, he fixed it. When something hurt, he let it. But even calm men carry storms. One night, he came back late from the north field, a gash across his palm and blood stiffening the cuff of his coat. Mara cleaned the wound while he sat at the table, silent. "How'd it happen?" she asked. "Barbed wire," he muttered. She pressed the cloth hard. "You're lucky it wasn't worse." He flinched, just slightly. "I don't do well with blood," he admitted. She looked at him, surprised. "You ranch. You live in it." He shook his head. "Not blood like that. Not my own. I got cut once, back when Clara died. I bled bad, and I remember thinking I didn't care if it stopped. I just lay there in the barn, bleeding, watching the roof like it could fall, and I'd be thankful." Mara said nothing, just wrapped his hand, tight and sure. "You ever feel that way?" he asked quietly. She finished tying the knot before answering. "Once," she said. "Then twice. Then too many times to count." Their eyes met in the glow of the lantern. Not pity, not confession, just truth. "I don't feel that way now," she added. Eli nodded. "Me neither." Later, when the house was quiet and the wind moved gentle across the eaves, she stood at the window and watched the night settle across the land. The snow shimmered in the moonlight, untouched. Eli's voice came behind her, low and near. "I've been thinking." She turned. "You and the boys. This place isn't much, but it's honest, and I'd like you to stay." Her breath caught. "I'm not asking for anything," he added. "Just your company, your presence here. You're not a burden. You've brought life back into this house." Mara looked at him, long and hard. "You sure?" she asked. "Yeah," he said. "I'm sure." A long pause passed between them, filled with every shadow they'd walked through to get here. Then Mara stepped forward, closed the space between them, and laid her hand against his chest. "I don't know how to start again," she whispered. He touched her hand, his fingers wrapping around hers. "You already have." By January, the snow packed deep and hard around the house, and every morning the world looked newly made. The cold taught them to listen, creaking boards, stiff latches, the slow hush of hooves moving through drifts. It was a season that demanded respect. Mara gave it, not out of fear, but out of a quiet pact with the land. She would not ask too much if it would let her keep what she had. She began teaching Samuel to read by the stove. He caught on fast, his small finger trailing the words like he was tracking something alive. Eli watched from the corner sometimes, silent, smiling in the way a man does when he's thinking about things he never dared want. Nathan could say a few words now, mama, dog, and a slurred version of Eli that came out more like "Iya." It made Eli laugh the first time, a low sound that caught in his throat like he hadn't made it in years. The days passed in steady rhythm. Mara cooked and repaired shirts and helped muck the barn. Eli showed her how to shoot a rifle, his hands guiding hers just once before stepping back and letting her aim on her own. She hit the tin can on her third shot. He raised his brow, impressed. "I wasn't helpless," she said. "I just forgot how to be anything else." "You remember fast," he replied. They spent more time together as the storm weeks dragged on, sometimes speaking, sometimes not. One night, after the boys were down and the wind was quiet, they sat at the table sipping weak coffee. Mara looked at him over the rim of her cup. "Did you mean it? That I brought life back into this place?" Eli met her eyes. "I did." She set the cup down. "Then why haven't you asked for more?" He leaned back in the chair, the lamplight soft on his face. "Because I don't want you to think this place is only safe if you give me something. It's safe because I want you here. That's it." Tears threatened behind her eyes, sudden and fierce. She looked down, pressed her palm flat against the wood grain of the table. "I never knew men could be like you." Eli stood and crossed the room slowly. He knelt beside her chair, not touching her, just close. "I'm not much, Mara, but I don't lie. I won't ever raise my hand to you. I won't ever turn your boys into men who think love means fear." She looked at him, really looked, and something inside her cracked. Not like breaking, but like the river ice cracking just before the thaw. Painful, necessary. "Would it be foolish to say I'm starting to care for you?" she whispered. He smiled, just barely. "Only if it's foolish that I already do." She reached out then, touched his jaw, let her thumb trace the rough line of his cheek, and when he leaned in, she didn't flinch. Their kiss wasn't fiery. It wasn't the kind that tried to erase the past. It was the kind that said, "I see what's broken in you, and I don't need you fixed, just here." The next morning, Mara stood on the porch, watching the sun melt lines into the snow. Eli came up behind her, wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. "You ever think about what's next?" she asked. He nodded. "Sometimes. And I think this place could hold more. Chickens, maybe a second horse, a proper school table for Samuel. And you could call this home if you wanted." She turned, looking up into his face. "I do." He kissed her again, slow and sure. Behind them, the door creaked open and Samuel stepped out, rubbing his eyes, followed by Nathan toddling with one sock half off. Eli reached down, scooped the baby into his arms, and Mara took Samuel's hand. There were no speeches, no grand promises. But in that moment, under the pale gold sun of a winter morning, something stronger than vows settled into place. A life, not easy, not perfect, but real. Spring came slow, peeling back the snow in streaks and patches like a scab on healing skin. Mud gathered thick around the edges of the barn, and the creek began to run again, first a trickle, then a full, living stream. The days lengthened, trees budded, life returned in careful steps. Mara planted a garden beside the shed, kneeling in the thawed soil with her sleeves rolled and her hair pinned back. Beans, squash, a line of hardy onions. She'd never had land of her own before. Now her hands moved like they knew what to do, like the earth had been waiting for her touch. Eli built a fence around the plot, mostly out of scrap wood. Said it would keep out the mule deer, though she noticed how his posts stood straight, like he was building something meant to last. The boys grew stronger, too. Samuel took to chores with pride, pushing the wheelbarrow with both hands and puffing out his chest whenever Eli praised his work. Nathan followed his brother everywhere, his stubby legs determined to keep up, his giggle loud and full as the birds returning to the fields. One evening, Mara sat on the porch steps, the boys asleep inside, her dress dusted with flour from supper. Eli handed her a mug of coffee and sat beside her. "Been thinking," he said. She raised a brow, sipping. "Dangerous habit." He smiled, looked out over the pasture. "I want to build another room on the house. For the boys. Something proper." She didn't speak right away. Just watched the wind move through the new grass. "That's a lot of work," she said softly. "I know. A lot of money. I've got enough." She turned toward him. "Why?" He met her eyes. "Because they deserve more than a corner of a borrowed shed. And you deserve a place where you don't have to listen for the door at night, wondering if someone's coming to take what's yours." Her throat tightened. She set the mug down beside her. "You want to build that for us?" she asked. "For us," he said. "Not out of duty. Because I want to." She reached over and took his hand. He folded his fingers through hers like he'd been waiting to do it his whole life. "You remember what you said that first day?" she asked. "Not while I'm here." He nodded. "You meant it." "I still do." The build started the next week. He drew the plans on the back of a feed sack, and she helped measure the boards. The boys watched wide-eyed as the frame took shape, as the hammering echoed into the hills. It wasn't just a room, it was a future rising from the ground, nailed together by two people who had nothing left to prove, only something to grow. One night, after the walls were up and the roof was halfway done, Eli pulled something small from his pocket and placed it in Mara's hand. It was a simple gold band, thin, no stone, just clean and warm from his skin. "My mother's," he said. "She wore it until the day she died. She'd want it to mean something again." Mara looked at the ring, then at him. "You asking me something?" He smiled, not nervous, just steady. "I'm asking if you'll stay, not just through the seasons, but for good, if you'll be my wife." She didn't cry. She'd done enough of that in her life. Instead, she slid the ring onto her finger, stood up, and kissed him under the wide, open sky. "I already am," she whispered. They married in the pasture 2 days later. No preacher, just them, the boys, and the wind carrying their vows out across the land. Eli carved a new sign for the front gate. Hart Family Ranch. No flourishes, just truth. And when summer came, With its long, warm evenings and tall green grass, Mara stood in the doorway of the house that was now hers, and rested a hand on the swell of her belly. She watched Samuel chase Nathan around the garden while Eli patched a fence post in the distance. She had come to this place starving, hollow, half buried by the world. Now she was full. The land had not given her peace. She had earned it. These roads are hard, but they lead somewhere worth finding. Subscribe to travel further.